Hello, how's it going? Welcome to the channel. So for this picture I decided to use some coloured pens, which is different than what I would normally do. So this pack here is a pack of 12 coloured gel ink pens that I got from the Temu shopping app, and this was around $7.50. Now I've got a bunch of pens like this, but I've been sort of expanding my amount of art equipment recently, just buying a few more different sets. So here I was drawing a bit of a sort of color chart for what they look like as a reference and seeing if I could do a bit of shading. Those circles there were me trying to kind of blend and seeing what worked with each other, going over it, like over top of different ones. And this was me trying to sort of get a lighter shade by doing it at a bit of an angle and then sort of doing some cross shading, going over with lines on different angles. So this was something that I just practiced with before I attempted to do this picture. Now I quite like this set, however it's very far from being a complete set, obviously being 12 pens, so you're already quite limited. But the other problem with this set as well was that it was sort of limited with the colours it did have. So I wanted to stick to just this set itself, to really try to see what I could do with these colours and review this particular set, and so I didn't want to add anything else to it. However, I did use this type of pencil to start off with to do a guide, because my skill level isn't really at a stage where I can just draw with a straight permanent pen, so I always try to draw up a bit of a guide first to get an idea of how it's going to look and to go over top of it with, so that way if I make a mistake I can erase it and then I can make some alterations and changes and stuff like that. So I didn't really think of it as an issue reviewing this set of pens, because I suppose everybody generally has a pencil lying around, and a lot of people do draw up a guide first. I just find that useful anyway. I do that on most of my pictures. So I did that, and then I also added a white ballpoint like gel ink pen as well for highlights, because I reckon that everybody should have some kind of white pens or markers to add highlights, because it just adds another level to the picture and just gives it that kind of edge. It just makes it sort of stick out a bit more. It's pretty good, but I wanted to stick to just the pens themselves for this one to see what I could do with them. Anyway, so I started off doing this guide, and then I started drawing this parrot. So basically I decided to draw a picture of some tropical birds in a kind of natural sort of environment, and the reason I chose this sort of picture to do for this set of pens is because I didn't really know entirely what to draw that would incorporate all of these colours, but I wanted something where I could use all of these colours in it. So I figured, what's a colourful picture to draw? Like some birds. So I picked a couple of different ones, which I first started off with this parrot, which is a scarlet macaw, and then I added a peacock later, and then a toucan. So I was going to draw the peacock originally with its feathers all sort of stretched out the way that they put on that display, but I decided it wouldn't really work for this picture. Now this is something that I quite like drawing, however I sort of avoid doing birds and animals because of feathers and fur and stuff. I find it really hard to sort of differentiate like the areas of fur and feathers and stuff. It's quite confusing to the eye for me, picking out all the sort of details with that sort of thing, but I do like the way that you can utilize like different colors for this sorts of thing. Now normally I would always just work with black and white, different levels of like black and white shading, things like that. So mostly just dark like pen, biro, or gel ink pens, or some of the art fine liner type pens of different varying thicknesses, or I would use pencil, like regular pencil sometimes, but I don't normally work with colors. So this is something that I'm trying to sort of expand on and get better at and just do, because I feel like I'm somewhat limited if I don't use colors, but it's not something that I normally have had much experience with. I do add a bit of color to my pictures, and I have done a bunch of different designs in actual colored markers, but when it comes to actual ballpoint pens, it's not something that I would normally do. So I'm trying to get better at that. I would use ballpoint pens, but they would be mostly just to sort of accentuate colors when I was doing marker drawings, or I would like get you know, just like a handful of colours, maybe a few, maybe a touch of red here and there, or something else depending on the picture. So this was kind of a new sort of experience for me, to be honest. So anyway, this set was somewhat limited with its colours. I mean, even though it had 12 colours, generally a pack that has like, you know, 10 to 12 will still have your primary colours, you know, like your yellow, blue and red. But for this one, it seemed to have 2 oranges and no yellow. So 2 of these oranges were actually, they were different shades, but one of them was more like the colour of kind of egg yolk, as you can see on this, the part of the parrot's face or head. So I would consider that more to be an orange than a yellow. So it's still a lot lighter than the other one, but it wasn't like a straight yellow, so it wasn't really the best for some of the parts of drawing which I wanted to do. Now there was no brown as well, so with these trees in the background, I had to kind of improvise, and I used a light colour green, which is kind of real sort of real like light grass kind of green. Probably a lot lighter than grass, to be honest, but yeah, as you can see there, I just drew over the pencil with the light green, and then I went over it with a layer of the light orange, and I sort of tried to blend it with the white. So as you can see on these leaves there, I was actually using the white pen quite a lot. The white pen I used to compensate for the lack of colouring, like lack of differentiation within of shades that I didn't really have a lot to work with. So the white pen I used a lot in this drawing to sort of try to compensate. See, like the waterfall in the background. The problem is that this set of pens appeared to have a light blue and a dark blue. There was a clear distinction between the 2 pens on the actual outside, the plastic, the grip and everything. One was light, one was dark, but they were pretty much the same sort of pen roughly. The light blue was only a few shades, maybe a couple of shades lighter than the dark, so there wasn't really a true light blue there. So for the areas of lighter sort of blue in a way, like it's not really that light, but it's more sort of like, it's not as concentrated. For the waterfall in the back next to the parrot, I used the white to go over the blue. So what I did was just add a few flecks of blue, and then I went over it with the white gel ink pen to sort of smear it and blend it around kind of thing. I was also quite limited with the plumage or the feathers on the peacock as well, and some of the background areas, so I just tried to use a dark green and went over it with a touch of black here and there. So I just felt like, I mean, I can understand some people would be able to make like probably like photo level quality drawings with these pens, but you know, for somebody who's really sort of just getting into it, not having a full set kind of makes you, it really sort of tests what you can, your skill level of what you can do, because you have to really sort of improvise, you know, especially like with this set I found, because there was no true light blue, there was no actual yellow, sort of might as well have been 2 oranges and 2 blues. The dark green and the light green weren't the best shades either. So I sort of, for a lot of it, had to lighten things up with this white pen. But I think I managed to get most of the colours on the peacock. But yeah, I couldn't really blend with these the same way, or more like shade with them the way that I could with a biro or even other smaller fine liner type pens. But this was really just a practice drawing to see how I would be able to do with colour, as it's not something that I've normally worked with. So yeah, me trying to darken up some of these leaves and parts of the plants in the background by going over the light green with the darker colour green, and just adding a couple of layers in there. Yeah, so that was this. This actually was supposed to be like a quick drawing, but it actually took me quite a long time to do, to be honest. It was a few sessions, but yeah. So I was sort of just expanding on it as it went on. I didn't quite know fully what I was going to do when I started drawing it. I just knew I wanted a couple of birds with part of the background, like the part on the right was done, but the rest I sort of improvised with. Now these rocks in the background behind the peacock, how I managed to make those look grey was that I just lightly added some black lines on them, not enough to really colour it in, but just enough to just have a little bit of a touch of black on there, and then I went over it with a white gel ink pen. So what it did was sort of reacted to the black lines on there, and it just managed to like smear them round and turn it into more of a grey colour, like really lightened it up. The same with the feathers on the toucan that I was just doing there. They're a bit too light a grey, but if I didn't lighten them up with the white gel ink pen, they would have just ended up looking like a solid black. So it would have been quite hard to actually tell that there was any like feathers on there. It just looked like a black shape. So yeah, so these plants in the background, I just added some of the pinks in there. There was 2 pinks in this set, so yeah, so I used them for the flowery parts on that. I didn't quite know what I was doing with the clouds. It's kind of hard for me to draw this sort of thing with these type of pens, or in general really. I was trying to get a darker shade in there, but I decided because I wanted like a reddish pinkish sort of sky, because I needed to use the pinks and the purple, I would pick a kind of like tropical sky with these clouds, and yeah, use a little bit of the orange to try and give them a little bit of a look, to make them sort of stick out a bit more, so you could sort of tell them apart. And I wanted to have it blend in with the purple at the top, so it ended up like I'm happy enough with how it went out, but it's not really at the detail that I would have liked. But you know, this isn't really something that I would normally do. I would normally draw like with a variety of pens, not just the ones there. So yeah. I think just doing some of the filling in took quite a bit of time as well, just covering all of the paper at the top. So these pens weren't really too bad for what they were. There's some okay ones in there, but it's quite limited to a degree. So I just like getting different sets because I can add them to my whole collection, and it just sort of expands all the different colors I have. I just take them out of the packets and then just put them on my shelf that's got like all of the different colors on there, and then I just draw them as a reference in this book of colors that I've got, and I just pick out what pen I need, because sometimes different sets have different shades that others don't, even if the set itself isn't really that great. So yeah, far from what I'd normally sort of draw, but I quite like doing this picture regardless, even though it just sort of tended to drag on for a long time. So that's pretty much it. As opposed to the ink, how long it lasted, well, I'd say the ink in these pens would probably last for about 4 or 5 of these pictures, but yeah, gel ink doesn't really last that long, but these ones did have a decent size ink cartridge in them. Thanks for watching.